It's proven to be quite effective. If you learn to give this presentation, I think in most cases, you'll sell pretty much anyone that you introduce the concept to. It's kind of logical and it kind of walks you through the whole thing. So if you learn how to explain each slide, it'll make you a pretty effective representative. So all this first slide is saying is that when you think about what's happened in the auto industry, people often talk about how Tesla disrupted, the automotive sector. I don't know if you guys know, but Tesla is worth more than all the other car companies combined. But they sell only 1/5 the cars that other companies sell. So these other companies sell, 500 times more cars than Tesla, but Tesla is worth more than all of them combined. So that's called disruption. So Tesla disrupted Detroit is something that you'll often hear. And Tesla is worth more than these companies because more than selling cars, Tesla is selling the future. And so they're selling the future of electric cars because they have the community's attention. And we're going to disrupt Tesla because every electric car, well, you're just going too fast, I haven't gotten there yet. Every electric car that's made right now requires a user to pull over and plug it in to recharge the battery pack. We have a technology that recharges the battery pack while the vehicle's in use by converting fuel to electricity. So disruption is something that everybody likes to talk about, but we like to make the point of why disrupt something. It's not broken. So you can go to the next slide. The number one challenge to electric cars is plug-in charging. Consumers don't like it. It's the number one impediment because people worry about having to find a charging station when they're on a trip or in an area that they're not familiar with. And you may or may not know that electric cars have been around since the 40s. They're not new. Lee Iacocca, which we're old enough to know, tried to launch an electric car. Consumers didn't want the cars then, and they barely want them now. Outside of Tesla, people have struggled to sell these cars. You can go to the next slide. All right, so we've covered that number one problem. The next slide. Another challenge for the EV market is that over 42 million Americans live in cluster buildings, high-rise apartments, that type of thing, which puts you into the next slide, into a real chicken and egg situation where you never have enough charging stations to support production. So if you have 2 charging stations in this building and you have 20 cars, people are waiting. If you put in 20 charging stations, but more people buy electric cars, then people are waiting. You can go to the next slide. And of course, that happens whether you're at home or whether you're on the road. So it's a chicken and egg problem that's not going to be solved for many years. And this is why consumers are reluctant to purchase electric cars in vast numbers. You can go to the next slide. And then we like to point out that there's a morality problem, in our opinion, with the government all of a sudden finding almost $1 trillion to put charging stations out for rich car companies. So if we had asked for that same $1 trillion to alleviate poverty or homelessness or something like that, the money never seems to be there. But the government has money to do this whole charging station gambit, which we think is wrong. So we think a part of the whole discussion around the electric vehicles should be this morality question. So the next slide. And then one of the truly big problems with electric vehicles is that they require an electric grid. So when the grid goes out, there is no power, and therefore there's no way to charge electric cars. If you look at New Orleans right now, that just got hit by a storm. New Orleans has been without power for 2 weeks, and they're estimated to be without power for 3 to 4 more weeks.
Oh, wow.
Now, President Biden was on has been doing conferences over the last couple of weeks. On one day, he makes it clear that these storms are going to continue to happen and that we're going to continue to suffer these calamities, which means he knows that the grid is going to continue to be knocked out. It gets knocked out in every storm. It gets knocked out from snow. Our grid is knocked out a lot. And then he'll have another press conference where he says, oh, we have to have electric cars. So in other words, he's saying that he wants to put a whole new generation of electric cars on a grid that he knows get knocked out with every storm. Maybe that makes a lot of sense to you, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If there is no power, you can't charge an electric car unless it's a Proteus electric car, because our car drives electric, but it converts gas or any type of fuel to electricity to recharge the car. You can go to the next slide. And then you have access problems. Anybody who's ever tried to put air in their tires know that the companies who put these public access services out there don't always do the best repair jobs. They don't always clear away the snow, and there can be access issues. So if you're planning a trip to grandma's house and there's only 1 or 2 charging stations, if you run into a situation like this, you could find yourself stuck. I have a friend named Pete Capriati, works for Hamilton Volkswagen in Hamilton, New Jersey. He had a fellow drive down from Connecticut. It's a true story. Bought an electric Volkswagen. This is just from Connecticut now to northern New Jersey. This is a 4 or 5 hour trip, but it was in the wintertime and the weather was bad. Took the gentleman 3 days to get home. Electric cars discharge faster when the weather is bad, and he couldn't find a charging station, so he got towed like 2 or 3 different times. It's a story that we have on video and we'll share with you guys. You can go to the next slide. And then you have issues around rudeness. Virginia is passing a law to fine people $500 parking in front of charging stations. States don't pass laws when there's not a problem. So this has been a constant problem. It's probably going to be a continual problem. The next slide. And then is what I call the shame problem. Every day you see people sending diesel trucks out to charge up electric cars. I mean, again, doesn't make a lot of sense. The next slide. And then you explain this slide this way. I say the industry has what I call a best-in-class problem. So this is like a rendering of the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is their new electric truck that's all over the media and in the news. So the way we view this is I'm told that Ford spent, number one, Ford's one of the biggest car brands on the globe. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars, $600, $700, $800 million developing this truck. 3 or 4 or 5 years. And after hundreds of millions of dollars and tens of years, the best they can come up with is a truck that if you give them an additional $6,000 for a charger, they'll do you the big favor of only taking 1 hour out of your life. $800 million, 5 or 6 years, and they still need another $6,000 and an hour out of your life to give you an electric car. So I would guess that this is about the best you can do with electric cars. It's one of the biggest companies on the globe. I don't think there is a clearer representation of the need for our Proteus technology. I mean, especially us as brown people, we tend to be late. We don't have that hour. And to tell you the truth, most people just don't have another hour in their life. And I certainly don't want to have to spend $6,000 and still have to give an hour after I paid $80,000 for a truck. It just doesn't make sense to me either. The next slide. And then you have to ask yourself, why are we going through all this trouble? If you understand the national energy grid, 61% of the time, when you plug in an electric car, the power to charge that car is going to be coming from a fossil fuel anyway. The next slide. On a global scale, that's 90% of the time. So on a global scale, 90% of the time, when you plug an electric car in, you're pulling the power from a fossil fuel anyway. Now, our technology converts fuel to electricity. And people think, oh, well, you're still using fuel. Well, so does the electric grid. Next slide. And it's not changing over the next 20 years. This is not a chart from Derrick Automotive. This is a chart from the International Energy Agency. The next slide. And when you transmit that power over the power lines, electric cars run on what's called a kilowatt hour. So for every kilowatt hour that you create at some distant power plant, by the time it gets to the electric car, you've lost somewhere between 15 and 35% of this energy. So it's hard to say that you support electric cars, but you're also a conservationist. Now, driving an electric car, even under these conditions, is still better than a gas car. But if you know that for every kilowatt, if you know that for every anything that you make, if you're picking apples and you know that you're going to lose 15 to 35% of the apples every time you pick them, you probably want to find another way to pick apples. The next slide. And actually, the transmission lines are the third biggest wasters of energy. A lot of people don't know this. So what you hear people saying is, let's put hundreds of millions of electric cars on the grid, which means you're going to create hundreds of millions of kilowatt hours of electricity. And we're just going to waste 35% of it. And we're going to walk around telling people that we're green and that we're conservationists. There's a lapse in thinking there. The next slide. And so the solution to these problems is what we've built. The next slide. It's called a Proteus generator. And our mission is to create the electricity needed to power electric cars at the car. A similar carbon footprint, but we take back the transmission line losses. I think it just makes a lot of sense. And we want to combine our Proteus system with solid state batteries to create probably the most efficient electric cars that have ever been made. The next slide. Because we're solving two major problems. We already explained number two, the transmission line losses. That's an unnecessary loss of energy, something that we can fix. And then the problem with the electric cars is they have what's called a battery density problem. You guys, since everybody talks about Tesla, we can use Tesla as an example. People, when you're successful, everybody wants to talk bad about you. But actually, Tesla is a great company. They have great technology. They probably have some of the best engineers in the world. But even Tesla, they promised us a Class 8 truck about 5 or 6 years ago. You'll notice that's not on the road. They promised you that Tonka truck that he broke the glass with the metal ball with. The reason you don't see, you probably know about the company Nikola Motors, whose president is on his way to jail because he had to push his truck down a hill to pretend that it would work. These guys suffer from the same thing that everybody suffers from in this sector, the state of battery technology. Batteries can't hold enough power right now to do what we want to do with them. So most of the companies are doing what Tesla is doing. They're packing these battery cases with so many cells that if you hit a bump and create a dent, you get a spark and the car blows up, catches on fire. It's because they're trying to pack these batteries too tight to try to get enough density in it to get the distance that you need. It's very dangerous, and you guys have seen the result. This is not something that I have to tell you. Just Google Tesla fires. I think you'd be flabbergasted by how many cars have burnt up. Next slide. So we're not solving the battery density problem. We're getting around the battery density problem by constantly recharging the battery. So we have an engine called a counterpoise engine that we have one patent for. It takes the gas and it burns that gas 83% more efficient than any engine ever has before, which qualifies for the low carbon or the near zero carbon marker. And then it's turning a generator that we have a second patent on. You can pull the patents from these numbers. And it's 100 to 1 better than the generators that are in the market right now. So you have a more efficient engine turning a 100 to 1 better generator. Its sole job is to create electricity to recharge the battery packs. And then the solid state batteries hold more power and are more efficient. They don't use lithium ion, so they're less toxic and they don't catch on fire. So we feel like, you know, we're on a path to building a much, much, much better electric car. Go to the next slide. So you can just read through this on your own thing to see the benefits of a solid state battery. The next slide. And you can compare it to the attributes of a lithium ion battery. So our cars right now have lithium ion, as everyone else does, but we're moving towards solid state batteries along with our Proteus system. Next slide. So when you put our technology with a better battery system, then you're going to get a better car. You're going to have better mileage. And Antoinette said something like, you know, 2,500 to 3,000 miles. Forget about that. Let's just say that our system only got 800 miles or 1,000 miles or 1,500 miles. It would still be 3 to 4 times better than any car in the market. So while we project that our cars will get that kind of mileage, they really don't have to. If we hit half our goal, we would still be 3 to 4 times better than any car in the market, and our cars won't catch on fire. The next slide. So when you combine our technology with solid state battery, you're going to get a better car, and you're going to get a car that's self-charging because it's converting gas to fuel. And we believe that that's what consumers will prefer, because consumers prefer convenience. Go to the next slide. So our current product mix looks like this. Like Antoinette said, we have cars. These are not renderings. These are real cars. These cars will be in our showroom here in a few weeks. And the van, we're taking the van company public simply because the van market is ripe for companies to go public right now. When you see a company that has a vehicle like yours be valued at 80 billion and you think your vehicle is better, well, of course, you focus on that company. It's no different than if you guys are in real estate. When you look at real estate, you think about real estate in terms of comps. If there's a house on that block that sells for 300,000, pretty much every other house that looks like that house on that block is going to be in that neighborhood. The same can apply to a company. If you have a company that looks like ours, that quacks like ours, that walks like ours, and it's worth 80 billion, ours might not be worth 80 billion, but it's going to be in that neighborhood. A comp is a comp is a comp. You know, so we have e-bikes, cars, and vans. Next slide. So this is just the same conversation about taking the van public in the near term, and actually now that's in the very near term. Next slide. And like we said, we're focusing on that because valuations in the sector is soaring. Next slide. We talked about this company, Rivian. Rivian is a company that has to deal with Amazon for like 100,000 vans. We're going to be announcing some deals that we have with some major names, like, you know, UPS, this type of thing. And so maybe, like I said, our comparables, our comps should be there. The interesting thing about how hot this market is 4 weeks ago, Rivian was worth 50 billion. I mean, well, yeah, Rivian was worth 50 billion. When's the last time you heard a company increasing in value by 30 billion in 4 weeks? So what you call like an irrational exuberance in the market right now. If you're a surfer and you see a big wave, you grab your board, you go jump on it. That's what we're doing. So we're going to surf this $1 billion wave. The next slide. There's another company called Arrival, just to talk about the comps in the neighborhood. A British company. They have a van that is going to go about 250 miles on a charge, they say. They have a $5.6 billion valuation. The next slide. And then there's a little company that has a little $9,000 van called Electric Last Mile Solutions. And even this company is worth 1.4 billion. The next slide. And so when you line them all up, when you look at the comps, if the little pissy van, the electric last mile is worth 1.4 billion, and then Rivian is now worth 80 billion, and Arrival is worth 5 billion, well, these are the comps. Our product is going to be better than all of them. So I leave it to each individual who's looking at this to figure out that, you know, if you saw 3 houses or 3 comps like this, how you would value the company. But even if you valued us as the lowest house on the block, we'd still be worth $1 billion. And if you valued us with the highest house on the block, we'd be worth 80 billion. I think you're going to see over the next couple of months that we have the prettiest, most productive house on the block. And so I leave it to you to determine how the market is going to value us. But like in real estate, you're going to be within a range. And anywhere in that range is going to be a good spot for us. Anything above $1 billion, that's a nice wave to ride. Next slide. Right. And when you look at how we run our business, almost every other competitor in the market has raised more than $2 billion. And we're literally in the same place that they are. I'm sitting in our first experience center here in Atlanta right now. And so we're just a year and a half behind Rivian, the company worth 50 billion. And we spent less than 15 million. So I've done with 15 million what these companies have done with 2 to 13 billion. And we're right on their tail. And as our technology is completed, we believe that we're going to pull out front. And if you believe that, then we're a company you want to invest in. If you find that hard to believe, I don't blame you. But I think you'll see that next year that we're going to pull out front. The next slide. Our vans are very profitable, over $25,000 in each one. We don't have to sell a lot of vans to make a lot of money. The next slide. The market is huge. There's an active market of over $48 billion that we could go after right now. And if you believe that an ambulance company or FedEx or the mail trucks or any of these people have a couple, 2 or 3 hours in their day to stop and charge an electric vehicle, then I would suggest you go invest in another company because you really don't get it. And we might not be the company for you. But we believe that all these companies would rather be moving. FedEx doesn't make money unless their trucks are moving. So every minute that it stops to have to charge a battery it's losing money. If any of you guys are in business, you tell me that if you were the logistics manager for FedEx, which would you take? A car that converts gas to electricity so that your vans don't have to stop all day? Or you're gonna go with the one that requires your van to sit still at a plug station for 2 or 3 hours, and maybe is going to discharge somewhere on some back road in Virginia? I think most logistics managers are going to choose Proteus vehicles over pure electric vehicles. The next slide. And then what we're doing right now is what every electric car company has done. We're selling pre-orders. What pre-orders do, pre-orders actually do a couple of things as you try to take your company public and get a valuation. It shows interest in your product. It generates revenue for the company, the pre-orders do, which we need to qualify to be on the exchange to go public. And to go public, you also need a certain number of shareholders. And so with the certificate, we're actually gifting 100 shares. That number is going to go down to probably 10 shares pretty soon as the company goes public. It may go away altogether because the company is about to go public. We're not going to be giving away public shares. But typically, securities laws don't allow people like you guys, working class people, just regular people, to invest in these ground floor companies. People always say, oh, I wish I could have invested in Amazon. I wish I could have invested in Tesla. I wish I could have invested in Uber. Well, the fact of the matter is the law doesn't allow you to. That's why you didn't. If somebody had told you about it, you would have put the money in. Nobody told you about it because you're not allowed to invest at that stage. You have to wait until they go public and all the money is made. And then instead of making millions, to buy a stock at $30 and it goes to $35 and they want you to be happy. You know, when you're on the ground floor, you buy in at 10 cents, you know, and $1 and $3 and $4 and $5. But they don't let people like you invest until the stock is already $400 and you can only afford 2 shares. So since we can't sell it to you, we're giving it to you. Now, some people are smart enough to appreciate that. Some are not, you know, but what can I tell you? So the program is designed to be attractive because if you help me, it's in my nature, like Antoinette said, to help you. So I could just do the pre-orders and give you a hat or a t-shirt, but I do want to build generational wealth in our community. And so I'm giving away 1% of the company as a part of this offering. This is designed for, I mean, to say it bluntly, poor people. Because, you know, rich people don't need the help. If you want to invest in my company, it's a $50,000 minimum investment, and you have to prove to me that you're worth more than $1 million. The only way I could get around those rules is to give you the shares. All right, so, you know, so that's that program. And, you know, really, you could stop the presentation there. So this is the way you explain this presentation, and if you go through it the right way, most people get it. You know, hopefully it rung additional bells in your head as I explained it to you. And you know, the more you give it, the better you get at it. I see you guys recorded this, so you can listen to it again and again. And then you just extract what I said, you put it into your own words, and you'll become a pretty effective presenter. So if you guys want to practice it some and then get back on a Zoom, you can give me the presentation and I can correct you and walk you through it, get you really tight, and then you'll go out. Because the biggest commission check that I've written in the last 2 weeks, I mean, usually Nat has the biggest commission check. Nat consistently makes $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. But some of the guys down here in Atlanta have gotten checks as much as $27,000. But just to give you an easy example, if an affiliate just sold one of these certificates a day, he'd be making $60,000 a year, just one. That means if you sold two, you'd be making over 100,000. So you could invest 2 hours of your time, and for most people, they would make more money than they make on their job. So I'm about giving opportunity, and that's why I structured this way. And if you're able to build a team and build an affiliate team, then you can really, really, really make a lot of money at this. So this, I think you noticed that every electric car company has done a pre-order program. If you got a sexy car, we have a sexy car. We don't have to give away anything. I mean, I'm doing this because I want to bring a lot of people along for this ride.
Question. Can organizations, churches, 501c3s,
anybody can buy.
Okay.
Anybody can buy. And you have to explain to people what's going to happen with the certificate. Is most people who buy certificates don't intend to buy a van. Certificate is going to be an asset because right now we're doing pre-orders. We're going to do somewhere between 12 and 24,000 pre-orders, which for us is a 2-year production cycle. So you have to imagine that you're a businessman. You know, you roll in 10 vans. You put in $25,000, $30,000 in gas in these vans a year. And then, you know, Antoinette calls you up and shows you a van that would cut your fueling bill from 30,000 down to 6,000. So you're like, every year I don't have that van, I'm going to lose 24,000. I have 10 vans. So that means every year I don't have that van, I'm going to lose 240,000 that could be in my pocket. And I know this guy named Coach who has like 10 of these certificates, which would put me at the front of the line instead of having to wait 2 years and lose almost $500,000. I can buy the certificate from Coach. Coach paid $1,000 for it. I'm losing $24,000 every year I don't have this van. How much would you give me for that certificate? See what I mean? When you look at it in real business terms, yes. I'm going to cut your fueling costs by 2/3. Every year you don't have my van, you are literally losing money. And there are some smart people who bought up the first 24,000 production slots, which means I'm going to have to spend another $500,000 because I have 10 trucks before I can get my hands on one. Or I can buy that certificate from somebody who has one.
Gotcha.
Now, even if you only sold that certificate for $1,001, you still would have your shares for free. So you'd be a smart enough guy to have gotten free shares in Derrick Automotive and made money on your certificate, even if it was only $1. But it's probably going to be $2 or $3 or $4 or $5,000.
So you're saying that the individuals can buy the certificates, they get the shares, but then they can sell the
Turn around and sell the
certificates.
certificate, and we're going to help you sell it. As a matter of fact, I'm about to turn the certificates into what's called an NFT, because NFTs are on the blockchain.
Yeah.
You can't whatever. So instead of sending you a piece of paper, you're going to get an NFT. I'm setting up an exchange. You're going to be able to trade things just like you trade anything, because people are going to want these certificates. I mean, you can talk to every now and then we'll have somebody on the line that's like in the trucking business, and they just tell you exactly the gas either keeps you in business when it's low or puts you out of business when it's too high. You know, I talked to one guy, he had like 50 trucks. When diesel went to like $4, he went out of business because he just couldn't make money. So when you tell a man that you're going to cut his fueling cost 2/3, believe me, he's going to do everything he can do to get his hands on that van.
So I have a question. Mm-hmm. What triggered your thought to create this type of technology? What did you see?
I didn't see anything. I bought a pickup truck.
Okay.
I bought a pickup truck, and my scientist, Dale Wolverton, you know, we had just sold this media company that I had to some Russian guys for like 11 million. And we sitting in my house playing chess, deciding what we're going to do next. And I told him, well, you know what? I just bought this Ford F-150. I'm putting like $85 every 3 days in this thing because I drive a lot. I'm putting like $100 every 3 days in this thing. I was like, maybe we could do something about that. Okay, you know, so he's a Navy trained engineer. He just starts laughing. He was like, if you could do something about that, don't you think that Mercedes-Benz, somebody would have done it already? You know what I mean? I mean, you guys don't know me, but you can get a load of my attitude. I'm like, screw that. I'm like, you guys just told me 6 months ago, if I had enough money and enough time, you could build me anything. I'm like, what happened to that conversation? He was like, well, that was true. He's like, but you're asking me to defy the laws of physics, and that can't be done. So anyway, we didn't solve the problem that night. I let it go after I said a couple more F that. And he's a religious guy, right? So maybe 9 months later, calls me 3:30 in the morning. There's no exaggeration in this story. Calls me 3:30 in the morning and told me that the Lord just gave him a vision. And what I was talking about, he was like, I just woke up and I drew it all out just like I saw. And I need you to like come out so I can explain it to you the next morning. This 3:30 in the morning. I'm on a plane the next morning at 7:30. Because if this guy tells me the sun's not going to come up, I'm going to stay in bed. Gotcha. I mean, we have that kind of relationship. So when people ask him now, because he's like a little white dude, you know, and I'm a cool black cat, they're like, you know, how you guys get together? He's like, well, I had a vision from God. I called somebody at 3:30 in the morning, tell him to come see me, and I need $500,000. Somebody calls you and say, oh, yeah, I just had a revelation from God and I need $500,000. Most people are going to hang up the phone. He was like, this guy wrote the check, and he's a black guy and he could write the check.
Gotcha.
So inside the company, we believe this engine is divine anyway, this whole system, because as we vetted it and took it to universities and everything like that, he didn't have to change anything. If you let's talk to Dale, this is what he'll tell you. He'll be like, he's always been an engineer, trained by the Navy. This is a serious guy. You know, he doesn't really tell jokes. You know what I mean? He's like, in his whole engineering career, he hadn't made anything that didn't need correction and haven't seen anyone else make anything that didn't need any correction. Mm-hmm. This engine has been perfect from the beginning. Math was perfect, angles are perfect, everything he saw in this dream is perfect. He's like, that just doesn't happen. So we believe it's divinely inspired. And then, you know, God always chooses an improbable warrior, which is me.